So good. All right, go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. And good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is doing great on this Friday after the Halloween. And so today we're going to talk about HST rebates program, how it affects buyers and sellers, and how understanding this program and how it works would help you hopefully in your personal purchases, as well as looking after your own clients as well. Before I get into this topic, I wanted to take a quick stock of maybe show of hands, or how many people are familiar with the HST rebate programs? And there's one for rental and there's one for primary residence. Has either familiar or have used those programs? So, okay, I see a few people are. Okay. So, okay, so just a few people. So let me do, what I'm gonna do is, we only have half hour for this conversation. And usually people have a lot of questions. So I would encourage questions when you get them. And then I'm going to spend a little less time on the presentation and see if we can engage in more of a conversation, because there's a lot of scenarios that usually people want to talk about, and I'll be happy to answer those questions. In the meantime, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Okay, here we are. Okay. Okay, so so a little bit about myself. I guess I'll have to give you a little bit of background. So we're a team of husband and wife team, myself and my wife. We have been doing this business for the last 12 plus years. And the background is my wife, Natalie, she is a real estate law clerk. She's been working with the real estate lawyers for the last 20 years. And this is where she learned about this program and learned how to apply it. And then we turn it into a business. And so we've developed a very niche expertise, specifically in the area of HST rebates. So it's not only about doing properly, getting the application done properly, but it's also understanding the rules, how it applies to the purchasers, and also understanding the consequences and the cases of the precedent, how CRA makes decisions, and when people also get in trouble through this program, we help them to get out of it as well. Okay, so there are two programs. So the way this works with new construction properties, whether they're houses, condominiums, townhouses, or any other new residential properties that are being bought directly from the builder. So these programs don't apply to resale sales. When a person buys a new construction property from a builder, he or she, at the time of the final closing, has to declare, or at the time of purchase and then closer to the final closing, they have to declare whether this property is going to be long-term rental investment or used as a primary residence. If it is being used for primary residence, then there's a process where the builder basically applies for this rebate from the government. The government gives the builder somewhere in the vicinity of, depending on the price of the property, $24,000 to $27,000. And as long as the condition for that to work out is that the owners of the property, the people who are on the title of the property, must be using it as their primary residence. So if everything goes as planned, then the builder gets the money in their pocket. So it's an incentive program for the builder, and then everything is done. So the person closing doesn't have to think about paying any money upfront to the builder. Now the situation changes quite a bit when the person declares this property as a long-term residential rental investment property. In this case, the builder no longer is allowed to collect the money from the government. So they have put in a clause where they charge you that money upfront at the time of the final closing. So let's say if your closing costs are, let's say with everything considered, let's say $30,000, then you have to add another $24,000 that you would have to pay to the builder in order to complete this final closing. And so that 24,000 is what we call the HST rebate. Now you have to, so the purchaser has to come up with that money in cash. It cannot be covered by mortgage. And once they've closed, the government CRA said, okay, let's be fair to everyone. We're going to return this money through the GST, HST, new residential rental property rebate application program. Oops, sorry. And then this is where you apply for the rebate. So the property must be rented out for a period of minimum 1 year. You don't have to wait for the 1 year to go by. You can apply right away as long as you have the signed lease agreement with the tenants for 1 year. And the first occupants of the property must be tenants. So we'll talk about that in a minute. And so the person applies for that rebate, and this is what we do, and then get their money back, all of the money back, and then everything is fine. Now these are two base programs, and sometimes when it comes to new housing rebate, the builder, there is a clause in agreements where the builder has the right to charge the money, the HST rebate money upfront, if they even suspect that the person is not going to use this property as the primary residence. And they don't have to give you any explanations. There's a clause in the contract where you sign off saying that the builder has full authority and power to charge that money upfront. If they charge you money upfront, then they don't apply to the government, of course. So if that happens, the individual, the purchaser, can also apply for the rebate back to get rebate money back if they're using this property as a primary residence. So so this is so far the two programs, and that's how they work. I usually give this time to ask people, for anyone to ask any questions, or we can go quickly to the next slide.
And I'm going ahead.
From my experience in the past, because I bought 4 new houses from the builder, he included this condition in each offer and never explained that I can apply for rebate, right? After the closing of it. And it was always the prime residence. So now from what you said, it's not mandatory, right?
It's not mandatory to
include into the offer, because it was always in the offer, and every time I was talking to the builder, he said it's okay, it's normal because you're buying a new house.
Okay, and so just to clarify further, she said it's normal to have to did they charge you the money up front?
It was included into the price.
Right. So that's normal if you're using this property as a primary residence. Yes, that's totally normal. That's the default position.
Okay.
Right? So the builder. So whenever you're buying a property, it's assumed that you're buying it, especially when we're talking about condominiums and so forth. I don't know why, but it's always assumed that you are buying it as a primary residence, and by default, usually the final closing and everything is done as if you're buying it as a primary residence. So yeah, but there's things that happen afterwards if you change your mind and so forth. So let me just quickly go through this table here. So this is how this works. If you use the property for a personal use or as a primary residence, and that means that the first occupants of the property must be the owners of the property that are listed on the title. On final closing, you don't pay anything else. So everything goes smoothly. This is what we talked about. The builder receives their money and everything is good. Now, if you're buying it if you declare this property, and it's best to declare it, well, we can talk about it a bit later, as a investment, or if you're buying it on assignment. So on final closing, HST rebate amount is added on top of your agreed sale price and all the closing costs. So let's say your total cost again is $1 million. So then you have to add another 24. So all the costs in with the price, net sale price plus HST, the actual 13%, plus all the additional considerations and everything else, let's say comes out to $1 million. Then you add another 24,000 to that. And 24,000 again is not covered by mortgages. So you have to come up with that money yourself as part of the closing costs. Right. So the same thing happens now for assignment deals. And the caveat here with assignment deals is that even if the assignee, so the person buying the assignment, is planning to use the property as their primary residence, by default, the builder charges the HST rebate money up at the time of the final closing. And this is where I can definitely say that I've helped a lot of agents save deals, because when these assignment deals are happening and at the last minute the purchaser finds out that they are responsible for additional $25,000 at the time of the final closing, you know, they get cold feet, they may want to back away from the deal. And this is where you can explain to them that they are completely entitled, whether they're using this property as a primary residence or as a long-term rental investment, they're completely entitled to receive that money back, full amount of the HST rebate amount, receive it back from CRA. It's so, and once they understand that, it makes a lot easier for you guys to close these deals with your clients. And so this is what this next portion is. It's usually returning a full amount. Now the HST, sorry guys, too sensitive. Okay, so the amount, why we say that the maximum you can get is 30,000. There's weird calculations that are going on into this application. And if the property is 400, so properties with net sale price of $450,000 or higher, the rebate amount is maxed out at 24,000. If they are lower than 450,000, so let's say they're at 400 or what have you, like some of the earlier properties that were being sold at those lower prices, right? The rebate can go all the way to $28,000 just because the way the formula is calculated. And so I wanted to also point out here that for the technicality of the terms. So a lot of people confuse the HST rebate with the full HST return. So HST rebate is based on HST, the provincial portion and the federal portion of the HST, right? So that's why it's called HST GST, really. But it's not, but people are not getting back the full HST on the amount on the purchase price. The 13% stays incorporated already into the calculation of the final sale price, and it doesn't change. What changes is the rebate portion, which is a separate category on the statement of adjustments and for all these purposes. So we're talking about specifically HST rebate, which is calculated based on the HST, but the rebate itself is a separate category, right? So these days, majority of the people are getting back $24,000, but if the price happens to be lower than 450, it can go all the way. It's kind of counterintuitive, but it goes up to $28,000. Any questions after this slide? Okay, so next, so what qualifies for the rebate and what doesn't qualify for the rebate? And it's very straightforward. So for rental investment properties, so you have to buy the property directly from the builder. We talked about that. you can claim these rebates within 2 years from the final closing. The occupancy stage for the condominiums doesn't count. So whenever you do the transfer of property to the owner with the mortgage or financing or what have you, then at the time, from the time of the final closing, the countdown starts. So you can actually own the property for 1 year, sell it. As long as you meet the criteria, you can still claim it, claim your rebates within 2 years. Majority of the people, of course, do it right away. So for rental investment properties, the criteria must be that the first occupants of the property are tenants. And you got to have a rental agreement for at least 1 year. So no short-term rentals can be applied. For primary residences, first occupants must be owners. Everyone listed on title must reside at the property. They're kind of changing this right now. And you must use these properties as the primary residence. So very straightforward criteria, but this is where a lot of people get into a little bit of a trouble. So the most common scenario is when a person buys the property as a primary residence, and then they, for whatever reason, so they close it as a primary residence, maybe for mortgage purposes. They gotta say it's their primary, and then they close it, do the final closing, and they change their mind and they rent it out. So the builder thinks that they're using it as a primary residence. Then they submit the application. Then CRA finds out that you're not living there, that this is not a primary residence. They usually get in touch. So interestingly, CRA goes after, not after the builder, but they go after the owners of the property. So if you said that I'm going to use this as a primary residence, and then you're not using it, the builder applied for the rebate, got their money as if it was a primary residence, and then CRA finds out you're not living there. They go after you. And at that point in time, it's important. That's why it's important that you have the ability to determine right away whether it's going to be a primary or not primary. And once they go after you, you have two options. So one option, is to say that you were you rented it out, and in this case, you can still apply for the rental rebate and get your money back. Or, well, in this case, you're not going to be getting any money back. You have to balance it off in the system. So CRA pays the builder. They go after you. They say you owe us money because you're not living there. And you say, okay, I've rented the property. So CRA, you can then send a rental rebate application to CRA. And CRA will basically balance it off in their system saying, okay, we paid them, they applied the rental rebate towards them themselves, and then they don't owe us anything, right? But you have to do it, because if you wait for more than 2 years, and sometimes CRA goes after people after the 2-year time limitation and say, okay, you know what, you have actually not lived at that property, then you owe us $24,000 plus penalty and interest, which comes out to, let's say, $27,000. And you say, okay, I'm going to go and apply for the rental rebate, but that's already after 2 years, so you cannot do that. And so then you're on the hook for $27,000. And many people get into this trouble, and they wait until CRA calls them. So if the situation like that occurs with you or your clients, it's better to advise them to A, pay up right away if they have access, especially if they could afford the $24,000, and declare that this is going to be a rental property right away. Pay the builder $24,000, extra $24,000, then make the application, apply, get your money back, and you're in the clean. Then CRA is off your back. Nobody's going to be hunting you down for extra money with the penalties and interest, right? Or another option is of course, when different situations happen with people's lives, and if they decide that they ended up in a situation where they ended up not living at the property, then it's better to apply for the rental rebate right away and basically deal with CRA. It takes much longer for this process to occur, but then you incur less penalties and interests at that time. So to further qualify for the HST rebate, you have to make sure that all of your, in either of the applications, that all of your agreements of purchase and sale with the builder, all of the amendments, assignments, and everything are, you have access to those documents, and they must be all executed by the builder. You need to have a fully executed amendments, and making sure that you have all the. So if you have if you bought a property for your children, for your parents, or even for your siblings, these are considered to be immediate blood relations. And so even so, I can have a primary residence, buy a property for my child, and that property will be considered still my primary residence. So with the bill, when you're doing this, you can show your intent with the builder saying, my child is going to live there. It's going to be my primary residence. So that way, everything is, again, is clear, and your choices are made right away properly. Now, if you happen to have, if you are also calling a property as a primary residence, and then there are two people on the title. So we had a situation where it was a niece and her aunt. So niece and her husband and the kid moved into the condominium, but her aunt was also on title. And when she and then CRA went after them and saying that, everyone has to live at the property. So of course, aunt wasn't living together with niece at the property, and they ended up being responsible for paying back CRA $24,000 because aunt wasn't living there. And this category is being disputed right now within CRA, but it's better to understand this from the get-go and understand the consequences that may be that your clients may get into if this is the situation. Also a situation where, for example, you move into a property for 2-3 weeks sometimes, or a month, and then you decide to rent it out. Those situations are also very, very sensitive, because CRA may come back and say, well, you have not lived at the property for 1 year. And by the way, the requirement is also to live in the property for 1 year, or to own it for 1 year in order to qualify for the rebate. And if you're not living there for 1 year, and you have moved out and you rented it out, then you're not, the first occupants of the property would not be renters. Yeah. Then all your so the first occupants of the property would not be renters, so it disqualifies you from the rental rebate, and you haven't lived there for 1 year. So in that sense, in that case, you also may disqualify. So it's important to know that, again, from the get-go, how are you going to use this property? And I'll give you a little, we had a client that basically bought a property, called it primary residence. Then he rented it out. The CRA went after him, but it was empty. It was sitting empty. He just rented it out a little bit later. And then CRA went after him and said, well, you haven't lived there. Did you rent it out? And he said, yes. And they said, did you have anyone else living there? And he said, yeah, my son came over there a few times because the property was downtown Toronto. So my son came in and stayed there a few weekends. And so CRA recorded it as being that the first occupants of the property were not tenants. It was his family, and they disqualified him. And we had to go like appeals and go to write notices of objection for that, just to explain that this was not, his son did not move in there. He just stayed there maybe once or twice. So you have to be careful what you say to CRA if they call you, to make sure that you don't unnecessarily incriminate yourself and disqualify yourself from the property. Also, sometimes people buy a property. For example, they have a primary residence. They buy, somebody lives, let's say, somewhere up north, but they work downtown Toronto. So they buy themselves a condominium that they use through the week. Sometimes they stay over there overnight because they work downtown. And so they think that this is their primary, secondary residence. And then they get into trouble with CRA. CRA says, no, this is not your primary residence. You're not renting it out. It's not your primary residence because you live still in Barrie or somewhere, so you disqualify from the rebate. So again, the person will be on the hook for that, right? So there could be only one primary residence. And another worst case, another scenario that we see very often is parents buy a property for their children, young children, so like early 20s. So they move into this condominium right after living with their parents, and they're back and forth between parents and the condominium. And then they don't switch over any of the documents, their cell phones, even their internet, all of their driver's license and other bank statements and everything else is still under the parent's address. And so CRA, sometimes when you say, you know, my child lives at this property, they reach out and they want to qualify to make sure that they're actually living there, that you're not, you're truly using it as a primary residence for your child. And they ask for proof of, you know, various types of documents to show that, you know, the child lives there, and the kids don't have it. And so we've had quite a few people that got on a hook for that. And it takes, CRA just needs, they always need documentation. You cannot just tell them, give them anecdotal evidence. So they, so people get into trouble for that. So make sure that your kids always change the address. If you moved, sometimes when people, they live in the house, then they downsize, they move into a new condominium and they forget to change certain documents to the new address for some reason. And so that could be a lot of trouble for people. That's basically it. I kind of had to run through this just to make sure we meet the time requirements for this. We have a few minutes. Does anyone have any questions?
So we did have one in the chat. Is there a minimum age for the children to be?
The minimum age is whatever the legal age is, 18, I believe it is, for them to be able to consider to be using this as a primary residence.
Perfect. Anna, go ahead.
My question was, you mentioned that it's better to claim right away whether it is going to be the prime residence or if it's going to be the rental property.
Yeah.
Well, when do they do that? Is it mentioned in the agreement of purchase and sale or prior to closing? That's the first question. The second one, let's say I'm planning to use it as a prime residence, and then based on the financial situation, after the closing, 1 day after the closing, and 2 days after the closing, I decide that I need to rent it out instead of living there.
Okay. So to answer the first question, there are two stages in declaration. So when you're buying you're signing the initial agreement with the builder, you're declaring your intent, how you plan to use this property. But we know that a lot of times things change. So, you know, especially with the builder, it takes 5-6 years for the builder to finish the project. And then the second time you're making a declaration is when the final closing process starts, right? So when the builder's lawyers contact your lawyer, and at that point in time, you also have to sign a declaration saying how you intend to use the property. And at that point in time, it's best to make up your mind how you're going to use it and declare it properly, because that will help you to avoid a lot of trouble from CRA. Now, to answer your second question, Anna, is yes, people's situation changes. One of the really good scenarios is, you know, people buy their properties for their elderly parents, for example, and then the mother or whoever moves in, and then they realize they don't want to live there by themselves, or there's stairs that are not working for them, for whatever reason, they want to move back out, right? Or you close the property, and like you said, suddenly your financial situation, you realize you cannot afford to live there. You have to stay at your old place. So this is where you have to basically, you do what you have to do. And since you have already declared this property as a primary residence, and you already did the final closing, you need to give it a little bit of time and then rent out the property. So make sure you don't move in there yourself. So the first occupants of the property for rental rebate application must be tenants. So don't move in there. If you realize you're not going to live there, don't move in there, rent it out. Once it's rented out, you send a rental rebate application to CRA. And what we do, we write a letter explaining that we don't expect money to be paid out because the builder did not charge us money up front, but we want you to balance it in your system. So it takes them about a year to do that, but then CRA may still reach out to you, may still tell you you owe them $24,000, but if you tell them that you are in the process of applying for a rental rebate, they will wait, the CRA collections will wait until you resolve that, and only then they will ask for something. So at that point in time, yes, you have to apply for the rental rebate as soon as possible. So
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect. We have a question from Michael in the chat. Does it make a difference if you buy the house through conventional or high ratio mortgage?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how you close, how you finance. You could even finance, finance the whole thing yourself, but the rebate is independent of that.
Perfect. Any other questions? Okay. Amazing. Mark, this was so great. We're so grateful for you and your time this morning. We're going to make sure that we'll send out a replay to everyone so you can all absorb this again. This was a lot of information in a short amount of time. We're going to share your contact details as well. So that way, if anyone has any other questions or needs your assistance, they can reach out to you directly and touch with you.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
We're available. It's kind of confusing at first to figure out this difference between rental, non-rental, primary, and so forth. And so if you have, very often agents reach out to me to speak directly to their clients. And of course, I would explain it to them how they, the risks and lack of the risks, therefore, so they would know that they're going to get their money back. And it takes an average from CRA to get, these days, the processing times have increased to up to 5 months, but we hope that it will go back to how it used to be. People were getting their money back within a month to 3 months before, but now they've changed their processing times, which, okay, it goes up and down. But in any case, feel free to reach out to me with your clients, and I'll be more than happy to provide the necessary information.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mark, and everyone.
Thank you for having
amazing.
me.
Of course, we're so happy. We'll probably have you back. I think everyone needs to hear this again and again and again. So good. Well, everyone, have an incredible day. Make amazing things happen, and we'll see you next time.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful day and the weekend.
Great.
Best.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.